啊，大家好，欢迎来到我的频道。Have you ever felt resource overload while learning languages before? Whether you're learning Chinese, French, German, Arabic, and especially Spanish, it's like you're buried in resources. Oprah Winfrey's coming in like, you get a resource and you get a resource as she chucks a dictionary at your face. That's gonna leave a mark. But there's tons of textbook series, podcasts, YouTube channels, and apps all vying for your attention and oftentimes your subscription monies. But the question remains, which resources are worth my time and my money? And that's a very large question, so I won't answer that fully today, but I will be talking about one resource in particular, Glossika. Is it a useful language acquisition tool? And for transparency, Glossika did contact me for potential sponsorship. But prior to any sponsored thing, I want to make sure of one thing. Would I personally use this product? I'm not gonna recommend anything or accept a sponsorship to something that I wouldn't actually use. That's not really fair to you guys. So this video is a not sponsored, unbiased review of Glossika, but if I do like it, I will definitely consider going through with the sponsorship. But all the thoughts that I have, whether good or bad in this video, are my own. So first up, what is Glossika? Isn't it an app and don't you hate apps? Well, yes and no. Gamification apps that teach you words in isolation. Duolingo. They aren't as helpful as massive immersion, but ultimately the best resource is the one that you will continue to use. Even if Anki may be quote unquote the most efficient way to learn new vocab, if you hate its interface and you can't get yourself to do 90 reps a day, you're not gonna learn the language. If you won't use the resource, you will never learn. So then the first question to ask yourself when choosing a resource is this: do you like it enough to use it every day? And with that out of the way, let's get into Glossika. So Glossika defines itself as an AI-based effective language learning program. The material is targeted to your level and refined by feedback from both your correct and incorrect responses to increase the difficulty while also maintaining a level of comprehensibility. They introduce new words in the context of sentences, and you review them through a spaced repetition algorithmic program similar to Anki. Spaced repetition, comprehensibility, in context sentences. It seems like Glossika has all the buzzwords that we in the language acquisition camp love. But is that really the case? But based on their goals alone, it seems pretty promising, especially for those of you who can't really get around to using Anki all the time. And I do know that there's some people who prefer to use LingQ instead, so you can import content and then use spaced repetition to review it. But I found it so buggy, especially for Chinese, that I just couldn't get around to using it. It would be great if Glossika could fill in that gap. Functionality while also the aesthetics of a really nice UX design, that would definitely meld these two areas together and hopefully be more approachable to a lot of people in the language learning community. But why don't we pull up Glossika? Okay. So when you sign up, you can do a 7-day free trial to figure out if you do like the program or not, but after that it is $24 a month, which is pretty pricey, but I will talk about my thoughts on that a little bit later in the video. But first, let's just sign up and see what they offer. So I already signed up for a free account, and what we can see from the landing page is you can select your source language and then select your target language. If you're an English speaker, use English, but if you're not an English speaker, you actually have a very large list of target languages that you can use to have the entire program in, which is pretty useful, honestly, especially for those who are not America-based or an English-speaking language-based country. So you can do that. I will select English because I want to start off in English. And then you can select your target language. So one thing you'll notice specifically in the beginning is there's a really decent amount of languages available. It's not as extensive as Duolingo, but if you think about the different types of content available, Duolingo claims itself to provide you the tools to start off learning a language. So they have the capabilities to add more languages. Whereas if Glossika's main goal is to help you learn a language more in depth, it will take them more time to generate quality content for each of the languages that they have. So we'll see how in depth they can actually go. How far can you actually learn by using Glossika? And another thing you'll notice is they have some very uncommon languages. So one thing you'll also notice is that if you're trying to learn a less common language like Uzbek or Taiwanese Hokkien, for example, there's not that many resources available for you guys, but there is a course available on Glossika. So although they may not have as many languages as a program like Duolingo, they do have some of the more obscure ones, which could be very useful for you guys. They have dialects, which I was very shocked about. So you can learn Spanish from Spain or Spanish from Mexico. You can learn the Putonghua, the mainland version of Chinese, or the Taiwanese version of Chinese. And if we're thinking about language immersion, getting the audio from the correct dialect that you want to learn is very useful. So I really do like that. So today I will check out two courses. The Chinese course, which I'll start from the beginning to identify, okay, if you're a beginner learning a language, is this actually helpful for you? And two, I'll do Spanish. Editor Bianca here, and I realized that I talked just a little bit too much. I don't think I can fit both the Chinese and the Spanish courses, Chinese being the more beginner introductory level, Spanish being the more advanced level courses in one 15-minute video. So I'm gonna split them up into two parts. This video I'll talk about the Chinese course where we can see what beginner level offerings Glossika has, and the next week I'll talk about the more advanced levels. So I will see you guys there. The other question is, how advanced can you actually get using Glossika? And I have a pretty high level in Spanish based on my Romanian knowledge. I can't speak anymore, but I can understand a fairly decent amount. I'm probably at like B2 at this point, maybe B1, because I haven't spoken in 7 years, but we'll see just how advanced Glossika can be for those more advanced learners. But I'll start off with Chinese to begin. So let's click Chinese. I'm gonna do the Beijing dialect. I'm gonna select, and you can say you're a complete beginner or you've already learned some. If you select you've already learned some, they will actually give you a test to identify your language level so they can correctly place you with the sentences that they think is best for you. But for the sake of this exercise, I'm going to be a complete beginner. Pretend I learned nothing. So they ask you to do a placement test, or you can just get started. I'm gonna skip the placement test and just click get started. So I'm gonna start from A1. What you'll see in the beginning is this is your home base. It shows your level. Right now I'm at A1 low, 0%. It shows how many hours you spent doing it, how many reps, how many sentences you learned, and you can also see your progress over time. As you scroll down, you have memory. So this is how many sentences you've remembered, and skill sets. I haven't fully explored the skills, but I believe, if I remember correctly, and correct me in the comments if you know a little bit more about what these skills are. Once you learn different grammar points or different more advanced portions of the language, then they will show up here and you can kind of review them. But we're going to learn new items, and let's see what happens. So this is what the app looks like. It's pretty much a flashcard, right? We have a couple of things that we can toggle. Right now we're doing listening. And on this top right-hand corner, you can see that there's little headphones, right? If you click it, it goes into practice mode. So there's two modes, listening mode and practice mode. The only difference between the different modes is that in listening, your emphasis is on trying to understand the sentence through listening. On practice mode, they also give you a location to type. So you can practice typing the sentence for some more active recall. To the right of it, there's a little gear. You click on it and you can toggle a few things. So we have the base language, which is English for me, and the target language. So in the base language, you can actually take the text out or take the audio out, change the speed of the audio. Personally, I prefer not to have the English text on there, but if you're a beginner, which is what we're trying to do here, keep the text on. Sounds the best if you use 0.7, if you need a slower version. They actually have a tendency to speak fairly fast. It's fine for me at an intermediate level at HSK5, but for a beginner, it's probably too fast for you. But if you do 0.5x, the tones kind of get messed up. It doesn't sound as good, so I would recommend using 0.7 if you're going to use that. You can also record yourself. I think this is only functional in the phone app. I haven't been able to get it to work on my laptop, but the premise would be you record yourself saying the sentence and then they can correct your pronunciation, which is very useful. There are a couple of other apps that do that as well. I know Humbook is one, and it is fairly helpful for that. So let's see what it sounds like.
你太懒了，你太懒了。
你太懒了. So I can type in the sentence, 你太懒了, and then submit it. Then it says that it's correct.
几点了？几点了？几点了？几点了？几点了？
We have the English definition on the top. We have the Chinese word, Chinese sentence. We have this thing here called the pronunciation, the phonetic of it. It's weird. This is also weird for Romance languages. I don't look at it, but the pinyin is also available, which is something that's more important for us. You can click the T right there, and it'll give you transcriptions for the phonetics, pronunciations. If you're using a language that has more complicated grammar, like feminine or masculine versions or different declensions, sometimes they do include those as well for reference, but you will notice this is not giving you any other information about the language, right? These are the first two cards, and they haven't taught us any grammar, they haven't taught us any words. You have to figure it out because they give you the sentence. They give you the words in context of a sentence. Is that a bad thing? I personally think that this is a very useful way to learn, but, and here's the caveat, you can't just use glossika. I know that 几点了 means what time is it, because I've already learned in HSK1 that 几 is a question word, 点 is a time word, 了, it has some level of time passing, right? You're not gonna know this unless you have a dictionary with you and looking up every single word, or you're using it in conjunction with a textbook, right? Another resource. So I think that this is very useful in context as a supplement, but not necessarily your primary language learning resource. The idea is to teach you massive immersion through using a better UX design, through using tailored sentences that actually apply in real life. Because again, if you've ever watched my HSK textbook series, what is one thing that I don't particularly like about them? Oftentimes they teach you words that aren't really relevant, and they go through topic by topic and teach you a few things. But even in HSK5, it's hard for me to talk about very regular everyday things. And why is that? Let's see what it does for the next couple of cards.
太忙线中，太忙线中，太忙线中。
Let me turn that repeat off. Okay. So the next one that they give you is 他忙线中. It's everyday sentences that you would use while you're at home. Let's go with the next one.
就在隔壁，就在隔壁。
Next one is 就在隔壁. 隔壁 is a HSK5 word. I still haven't learned this yet. It's at the later half of HSK5. But look at how useful it is. You can talk to someone, hey, he's busy on the line. Oh, the thing that you're looking for is right next door. You can actually incorporate these from day one, even if the words that they selected are more advanced. But again, this has to be used as a supplement, or else it's going to require a lot of back-end work on your part to identify how do these parts work together. If no one tells you that 在 is a location word, or 就 functions in this way, or 隔壁 is next door, it may be harder for you to parse through what's happening. At HSK5, I also have things to learn from A1. What does that mean? Even more intermediate or advanced learners can go back to glossika and learn these new tools, learn these new words, because again, their focus isn't on following the same standard framework as other language learning things, as other Chinese courses, right?
这不可能，这不可能。
The next one, 这不可能, like you can use this all the time.
你太懒了。
So what you'll all also notice is they're incorporating spaced repetition to this. Everyone knows, if you've watched my videos before, how much I love spaced repetition. It's great. In each learning session, they give you around 5 cards, 3 to 5 cards that are new. And then you just cycle through them in a spaced repetition type of way. I would prefer if you would be able to toggle them, so increase how many new cards you want, like you could do with Anki, or decrease them. As a beginner learner, especially with the form of language learning that they're teaching you, which is context of sentences, that ends up taking up more time, it's harder. So I understand why they give you fewer cards so that you can review them, learn them, and then just do more lessons. But as a more advanced learner, it would be easier for me to just tell them how many cards I want, how many new words do I want to learn. So I completed that session. it tells you what are the new sentences that I learned there. And so this is new sentences, I believe, for the next lesson, which I think is very nice. It gives you a preview of how many new cards you'll learn. Again, these are words you can start incorporating immediately, whereas I wouldn't learn these until much later. Honestly, if you use it alongside HSK, it will probably help you to pick up words more quickly. So we finished the first lesson. I don't think we need to go into multiple lessons. The audio is really good. They get both female and male speakers. They're very clear, and I definitely think that's very useful. One thing that's hardest for me to do is find good audio for my own cards. I have to use an AI generated Google type of thing to put audio on my cards, and it sounds like a robot because it is, you know, it's pretty good, but it's not as good as native audio. So that was a beginner level course. But yeah, just to summarize some of my thoughts on the beginner courses that Glossika offers specifically for Chinese, I definitely think it can be very useful to supplement your learning. It's not going to teach you grammar, it's not going to teach you the fundamentals, it's going to be more challenging if you're using just Glossika for your learning, but it will be helpful to teach you a very good habit of learning words in context and not in isolation. It'll help you remember words more quickly. It does involve the spaced repetition component that I think is very useful for language learning and retention of the vocabulary. So it can be a very great tool, and I definitely think the content that Glossika has for these beginner courses are actually way more advanced than you would think. As well as being very useful in your everyday life. It may be challenging, but you can immediately incorporate it into speaking from day one if that's what you like to do, or just knowing what other people around you are saying, or knowing what your dramas or your podcasts are saying. So overall, I think it's pretty good. Next week, we'll talk about what a more advanced course looks like. Is it going to be challenging enough for you to improve your more advanced B1, B2 level language learning ability? So I will see you guys next week for that video. 再见!